Welcome to One on One. I'm Rick Kaplan, and my guest today is Stephen Graham, and he's the principal and director at an environmental risk management practice for corporate environmental advisors. How are you, Steve?
Very well, Rick. Yourself?
I'm good, considering. Yeah, so you're pretty well versed in, well, I don't know if anyone's well versed in this, but going forward with the COVID-19 and preparing your properties and getting ready to actually maybe come back to work.
Sure. Well, the world's certainly different than it was even a couple of months ago. And we certainly are focused on helping people get ready for reentry. And there are some key considerations that go with that. And that's something that we've been able to draw upon our work for clients doing asbestos and mold oversight, the remediation oversight. And fortunately, we had folks who had infectious diseases background, and we were able to pivot to provide a service that folks are asking for, which is this current topic.
So you're getting a lot of people looking for this type of information, this type of work to be done, I would assume.
Right. And there's different levels of what people want to do, what they can afford to do. Of course, this is an unusual situation in that the economic pressure is tremendous to first reopen and then to not have to spend what they don't need to spend. So that leads to, what is the bare minimum that can be done to allow people to safely return to their workspaces.
So there's going to be different types of properties that are going to have to adapt to or figure out how they can prepare to reopen. So how do you deal with that situation?
Sure. There is, in rough order, quite a difference from, say, office and retail, including, say, lenders and convenience stores and so on, through industrial, to then when you get to multifamily or those that have overnight accommodations. The CDC defines those that don't have overnight accommodations as community facilities, non-healthcare. And so as you move from, again, office and retail through multifamily, even to research lab, university, hospital, healthcare types of workspaces, they have different requirements. At the lattermost, healthcare, research lab, university, they have very specific requirements that are in their overall approvals to maintain their laboratories or the hospitals. They work under different jurisdictions, different regulatory jurisdictions that do require certainly a more heightened level of even verification that COVID is absent before they get back into their workspace or to allow it to return to more normal practice.
Now I have to ask, and maybe this is a stupid question, but how come people weren't doing these type of, cleaning process and making sure that the facilities were up to this standard all along?
Well, a couple of reasons. I think one of the main ones is, well, it wasn't needed. So if it's not needed, then you won't do it. I do need to distinguish between cleaning and disinfection. So cleaning is simply removing surfaces to an acceptable level of cleanliness. And that can be just simple soap and water. Disinfection, particularly following the CDC and US EPA guidelines, means follow certain cleaning practices, protocols, and using certain prescribed solvents. And because this is a virus that can retain its presence on surfaces, it has certainly increased the level of concern. At one point, relatively recently, it was felt the virus would not be present after even hours or days. But the CDC released a bulletin on March 27th, and that they had found, looking at cruise ships in particular, that the virus was lingering for up to 17 days. So that was really news to them. And so that's, to get back to your question though, it's like anything. I mean, I think people do, certain kinds of facilities do routine cleaning, but this level of cleaning and disinfection is certainly due to this unique situation.
Well, it seems like cruise ships, they're always carrying all kinds of things anyways, because, you always hear of outbreaks on cruise ships. But so now when you're preparing to come back, to reopen, what responsibility is the landlord? Let's say you have a mall and you have retail stores. Who is responsible for making sure all of those, the whole facility is clean or safe?
Sure. And it might be helpful to step back just very briefly. And do spaces need cleaning? And there's really like three different steps in that process. So assuming that, say, 3 to 4 weeks is a safe enough period to go back into a space where no one has been, and the virus by itself should be absent. If the kind of the second level of protection, let's say, or reassurance that COVID is absent, would be the cleaning and disinfection process. And then the third is, and again, it would just be those who are required or feel that they should have this verification of disinfection be undertaken because it gives a peace of mind. That's a third and a bit more specialized step in the process, and that's actually testing for the absence of COVID, and that requires some sampling. And that's a relatively new endeavor that's occurred in recent times. I'm not quite sure that's answering your question, though, Ray.
Well, yeah, pretty much. But you're going to need a specialized company that would be able to make sure that your facility is clean, I would think. Because an average cleaning company, they probably could clean it, but how do they know they got most of the virus if it was present?
Right. And by the way, I remember the rest of your question was, who's paying for this? We need to get to that. It's obviously very important. Well, the CDC's guidance is telling us that, and it's right there on anyone's webpage, if you do the cleaning, you should be okay. If you want reassurance that the cleaning has worked, and I'll give you an example. We have seen that without sufficient, mechanical or physical action, meaning scrubbing of surfaces, particularly in let's call them high impact areas, say an emergency ambulance or a hospital would be potential examples. If we're not physically doing that, as well as other means like say fogging, there's potential that it still remains. And so it does come down to you have to verify if you want that level of reassurance. It's really going to be a matter of risk management on behalf of the employer and the landlord. What are they comfortable with? And again, what's the level of cost that people can afford? Getting to the topic of reentry. So there's really two strategies. One is, should you choose to clean and disinfect, then either with or without that, you're ready to go back into your space. And at that point, it's really best to have reentry plans. And there's going to be at least two kinds, big picture, generic types. One is for the tenant themselves and their employee. So when they get to their door, whether that's a strip center or in a big office building, the steps they're going to take as they get into that space, and that means touching the door from the outside, opening that door, going in with the potential of being measured for temperature, which some large big box retailers, their staff for now, for example, even as of today, are not allowed to come into the building unless they pass the 100.4 degree Fahrenheit temperature test. And also, we're seeing that some landlords are also looking at these thermal imaging tests before people can come into the building. Now, there's certainly questions about that in a variety of ways, including potentially legal, which is not anywhere near our expertise. We leave that to others. But proceeding back to the tenant, as they've now, maybe they've taken their temperature or they haven't. I mean, it's best if you can do that. There's a challenge now to get even a simple thermometer. But nonetheless, you then proceed into your space. And, maintaining a mask is going to vary whether you're on all day, whether you're in a cube or you're in a closed office. There's going to be break room and conference room considerations. The use of break room amenities in the past, refrigerator, coffee machine. These are all practices that need to be modified. And also the custodian staff, the routine cleaning people, also need to be coached on what kind of solvents they need and the frequency of their solvent. And the individual employee potentially is really involved in this almost daily cleaning process. So these things, that said, are just the employees, the tenants, and as an employer and his staff. If it's a larger setting, a larger landlord setting, then there's a whole set of other questions which a tenant will and can and really should ask, which is, as I enter a building, same thing, you're touching, your hand is touching the exterior of the building to get in. You walk into a lobby. What kind of communication, in particular signage, has happened? And has there been, which there really should be for tenants and potentially for landlords, a pre-entry questionnaire, which is tenants, and we're advising they should really consider having a signed questionnaire. And we're seeing a number of people doing this that's sent in advance to their employer before they're allowed to enter the space, which identifies essentially negatives to the question of, have you been in contact with certain people who were infected, traveled to certain spaces, and all the other routine questions. So back to entering the large building, say downtown Boston. You're in the lobby. Hopefully there's good signage to direct you. There's one-way signs on the floor. There's 6-foot distance markers. You go up to the security, which is required in many buildings. How is that handled? What do they do with your identification? Are you screened before you get there and you can simply hold up from a 6-foot distance your badge? From there, you go to the elevator bank. So you're going to touch elevator buttons, or if it's a random generator, which is the trend in newer buildings, how many people should be allowed in the elevator? Are there spaces in that building that might have, say, medical offices that people would not necessarily be comfortable being in the elevator as patients? So then the biggest remaining question is air filtration. So how is that handled in the building? Depending on the size, there can be multiple filtration, and air moving patterns and so on. And should there be an extra level of filtration to guard against viruses circulating?
So there's quite a few unanswered questions here. And who should be giving the answers to a lot of these questions? Should it be the government, or should it be the responsibility, just the given responsibility of the landlord and the tenants?
Well, I think this is a cutting edge conversation. But, you know, we certainly would welcome direction from the government on how to do this. We are finding that it's really, people are having to make it up as they go along. And you can tell I've pointed out a number of things that, which don't necessarily occur to someone until they're out in front of the building for the first time after 4 weeks. And they're going to start thinking about these things. And that's actually not the time to walk through all these. So, I mean, our advice if people ask is to get someone knowledgeable to help you put these plans together. They don't have to be that complicated, but there are a number of steps that need to be thought through. And we characterize them as safe reentry plans, essentially. And it has to be tailored for the different facility. I mean, some will have a lot of people. Construction sites may not have that many, you know, person-to-person interface points, except, you know, upon entry, exit, and, you know, and break time.
So this is something that you should have the plan implemented before you intend to reoccupy your space. Now, they're talking about May 4th as people can start going back to work. I don't believe that May 4th is going to happen, but that's what they're saying. You know,
right? And I know the governor, the mayor of Boston, and other officials, they're all working hard to figure out when is that day. But it is relatively soon, and it's you know, people ask us, well, when should this happen? It's like, well, right now, basically. These kind of plans should be formulated, and it's going to evolve. I mean, if we think about how the supermarkets evolved in a matter of a week or two, we started out, well, let's limit the number of people in the store. Let's wipe down the handles of the carts and so on. But we didn't have one way. Hardly anybody had one-way traffic. Okay, then that occurred to someone. It's like, geez, that's probably important because you know, in those aisles, you're going to pass somebody certainly less than 6 feet. So that was, you know, a nice evolution in thinking, and they you know, they progressed from there. And then their staff they had plexiglass in front of their employees and masks and so on.
and a lot of people, all the employees now seem to be wearing masks, but I think a lot of people are starting to wear masks and wearing gloves. So I'm not sure how you're going to spread the disease as much as it was being spread before, when you have so many people trying to protect themselves from it as well as giving it out.
Right. Well, it certainly should be reduced. You know, not all will have access to like an N95 mask. I mean, so there's lots of homemade masks, and they're much more effective than no masks, which is, we went through a phase of that too. So, well, if we don't have the best mask, we shouldn't have any mask. And then we went from that to
right.
Well, you know what? Turns out any mask is better than no mask.
Right.
You know, I think, you know, people will just organically be adjusting to this. And I think that at least the first, some number of, maybe it's many weeks to months, will be wearing masks, not only in their access points from car to office, but within the space. If you're in a cubicle situation, you're probably facing, you know, 8-hour day wearing the mask, and that's going to be hard, but be on the phone and so on. The firefighters, for example, typically they have it on, they're wearing it around the clock. You know, only when they go in their individual spaces are they allowed to take off the, you know, the masks. So I think that's a kind of a matter of course that'll have to happen.
Well, I'm hoping we start going back to work shortly, and I'm hoping the date is May 15th, because that's I have that in the pool, the company pool. So
Great.
I'm trying to push the government to push it to that date, so I win. But, you know, I right now I could take any day. It would be a pleasure to go back.
Sure. Well, many people are anxious, of course. You mentioned who pays for this at one point, and what are the differences? Generally, the tenant's going to be responsible for their employee. It really depends on the lease terms, particularly in a building that's owned by somebody or operated by someone else. The lease terms are going to dictate. If you have a triple net lease situation, generally it says that the tenant's responsible. They may or may not be operating their own HVAC system, and that's a concern. If you've got say a small shopping center and it has a certain number of air circulation patterns, probably people will want to know, well, what is that? Going back to the real basic, even before you re-enter, we kind of skipped over that there may have been tenants that have people who did have COVID at one time. And there's also skeleton crews that have been in certain spaces this whole time. So there's maybe one person. There's a number of working situations where staff have rotated. And so there, person A, A goes in, 1 week or 1 day, and then person B the next day.
Right.
So depending on these different cleaning and disinfection or strategies, kind of need to be aware of, well, when's the last time somebody was in there, and kind of make sure that they haven't been exposed in that time period. It's easy if people have not been in that space for 4 weeks, but I've certainly become aware that a lot of folks have been visiting offices, even briefly, through this period. Another part of the who pays part is, well, are insurance people going to pay? And I've been advised that many of them have exclusions based on essentially communicable disease exclusion, they're calling it, and or human-to-human contact. So there may be insurance that's available through business interruption and so on. But for this particular reason, it's a pretty gray area. And it seems like there's more costs excluded than not.
Yeah, well, that's everything is kind of a gray area right now because no one knows
Right.
what. Steve, I appreciate you doing this. A lot of great information. With this hopefully will be May 15th, the date where everyone starts going, and hopefully they come out with a vaccine soon. So the whole thing is not an issue. So those are the only things we can hope for right now. I appreciate taking the time, Steve. It's Steve Graham, Principal and Director, Environmental Risk Management Practice for Corporate Environmental Advisors. Thank you, Steve. Have a pleasant afternoon.
Thank you, Rick. Take care.
Thank you for watching today's interview. If you'd like to be a guest, a sponsor, or even advertise in the New England Real Estate Journal, you'll find our contact information in the description box below. You can also find all our social media platforms so you can follow us, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel.